everyone. Happy Women's Day to everyone. Happy Women's Day to our guest speakers today. Happy Women's Day to everyone that's on the call. I'm so excited. This is our final panel for the weekend. Well, it's Monday, but yeah, for the weekend. And I'm so excited to get into today's topic. For those that don't know me, I am Pelontle Mosimege. I am the founder and the host of Brigade, the podcast. And on the podcast, we've interviewed so many women, including the incredible women that you see here today. And so I just wanted to pull a few of them into a room today, women who are really making moves in their careers, doing the most. And hopefully we can learn from all of you today and better be able to navigate our own careers from some of the takeaways that we get from you. So I'm just going to go around the room and I would like you to introduce yourselves. You know, sometimes you introduce people, but I'm always interested to know how people introduce themselves. So Ayanda, we'll start with you.
All right, I'm just unmuting. Oh, is it unmuted? Yeah, I'm looking for the mute button. Hi, everyone. So I'm Ayanda. I'm Ayanda Vana. So I am the current COO of Khula, which is a really cool agri-tech startup. And we basically provide platforms for farmers, which has been a very interesting journey because my background is law. So I actually am still doing some law, but I think part of my role, I've just evolved in terms of doing other things. And I have a podcast called Equip and Elevate. I launched it about 2 weeks ago. So that's been an exciting journey and very humbling. So yeah, that's me. Very simple girl. And yeah, I'm excited about today.
By the way, regarding your podcast, congrats. And if you haven't tuned in, if you haven't listened to it, you had Jabulile on, who was a speaker for us on Saturday, and you had Buhle, who we chatted to yesterday on this platform. So check it out, guys. Okay, Zesipho, I'd like to hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi to the Brigade community, and hi Bilo, thank you so much for having me on this beautiful day for us to connect. I actually wish you'd done the intros because this is always the hardest part of these meetings and these sessions. So my name is Zesipho Mncwango. I am a marketeer by profession, but a very purpose-led one. So I started my career out at the Estee Lauder companies and immediately fell in love with the world of beauty and what it does for women and how beauty and brands have such a critical and pivotal role to play in how we as women and as society see and define ourselves. And I then moved on to work at Chanel and continued my journey into really falling in love with what iconic brands can do in society and the place that they have in making women dream and feel so seen and heard in the rooms that they enter into because of how they feel about themselves in those spaces. And I know our topic for today is all about breaking boundaries. And so for me, I decided to break a self-imposed boundary of leaving the world of luxury beauty to then join FMCG. And I then became a brand manager at Unilever, but really continued my love affair still for iconic brands and for beauty. So I worked on the Pond's brand and the Dove brands. And then more recently entered into, I think, breaking the most exciting and the biggest boundary for myself career-wise by redefining my trajectory and my purpose and starting my venture into entrepreneurship through an online platform called Lamula, where we essentially keep beauticians booked and busy by allowing everyday users to go online and be able to book a beautician in their area for a service at their doorstep. And then in the career space, I more recently took on a completely new boundary that I decided to break. And I have entered into the field of liquor and am now the brand manager of the liquor portfolio for Distel. So very, very excited to share with you today what it has meant for me to be a woman who continues to break boundaries for herself and to break boundaries in all sorts of rooms where people like us and girls who look like us haven't yet entered into those territories and charters before. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Yes, and your recent move is actually, it's very recent. So congratulations once again. And now spoken to you about it separately, but congratulations on this move. Luyanda,
Thank
please
you.
introduce yourself. Oh, you're muted. There we go.
What's going on?
We can hear you now. Yes. We can hear
Cool.
you.
You
Yes.
should hear me now. Yes. Why would you put me after this great introduction? Now I'm just like, who am I? What do I do? So
She should have been
to be part of
first.
a panel with such powerhouses. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Luyanda Duma, 24-year-old, born and bred in KZN. I relocated to Johannesburg to, pursue my studies in varsity. So I did a BCom industrial psychology and then moved on to completing my honors in human resources management. So I'm formally known and, commonly known as the HR enthusiast, hashtag corporate queen, because I think I've kind of aligned myself and presented myself like that on social media. I'm that woman that wants to to change the narrative, rewrite what human resources is and what it looks like in organizations. So I'm very passionate about women development. I'm passionate about talent management. I specialize in recruitment, training and development, as well as talent management. So I am the girl that will identify talent, groom you into becoming and stepping into, your highest self. I'm also the founder of Stripped by Luyanda and She Who Dreams, which are both dear babies to me because it definitely aligns with, the part of me, that empowers women and has, a huge passion for developing women. I'm also a budding philanthropist. I've got an NPO named the Multitude Foundation, whereby I do a lot of, CSI work. I'm a speaker. I'm passionate about people. I love God. And I'm just a lover of life as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luyanda. Okay, so we're going to dive into today's conversation. Before we do, I just want to let everybody know, please do pop your questions in the Ask a Question box, and we will do a Q&A. As soon as we've had our panel discussion, we'll have a Q&A and answer everyone's questions towards the end. Okay, so ladies, I would like to know from you, this is a question for everyone here today. Tell me the role that crafting a brand image has played in your career and in your workplaces. Ayanda, I'll start with you.
All right. I think when I was thinking about this question, really was trying to understand what my brand image is and really trying to understand how it fits into sort of my type of work. To be honest, when I was thinking about this, and I was just thinking that I've actually, for me personally, because I have such different images in different spaces, I've sort of learned to navigate that and sort of position myself as per space. For instance, when you think about your brand image within, the workplace, it's very different for me when I look at the socials. It's a very different world. And so even trying to merge those two for me has been something that I've been learning how to, can I merge those two sort of brands, because, a lot of people tend to have sort of a solid one that's been consistent everywhere. But with mine, I think I found ways to sort of separate them in such a way that it's relevant for that specific sort of sector or specific for that industry. And I think with what I'm doing right now, there's been such a sort of a way of introducing that and how it could also shape in the workplace. But to be honest, for me, I think the biggest thing is that, and I think it also makes sense because when I started in law. So in law, you don't really have sort of how you define your brand image. Your work is your brand image, how you position yourself in that space. That's how what becomes important, whether what it looks like outside that, it's not as relevant as within that space. And I remember once starting, like one day I'm going to be asked how I was able to transform my brand and law. And I quickly realized that no one really cared about that, And now I'm in a different space where it is important. And that's where I'm trying to sort of mirror those two the two things, and how can I also bring alive this way. Before it never mattered whether I was trying to distinguish myself as someone who is trying to brand myself within a space of influencers if they're looking for legal advice, and then coming through my firm or our firm and stuff, and sort of establishing myself as that. I quickly realized that in that kind of space, it was really immaterial versus being in this kind of space where it is important to sort of position myself. So I think for me, more than anything, it's still something that I'm still trying to navigate, because I've sort of developed a sense of separation based on the industry I was in. And I quickly also realized that it's not the same for every industry, because other industries are very different. There are certain things like when you can be sort of a CA, obviously depending on the mandate that that company or firm has, it also forms part of your vision, which also informs your brand, right? So if those things are not really aligned, it's also hard to feed it back to sort of your image as a whole. So I think the gist of that for me, it's really been trying to understand how to bring those two, because I come from a space where I had to separate those because they didn't necessarily speak to each other. And I think that's always been important for me, that I don't want to have sort of an image or create this image where those two things don't really speak to each other, but making sure that there's an alignment. You know, when people see that and see me, they understand what I'm for, they understand what I'm about, they understand that there's sort of that link. So the minute doesn't, and that's where I think for me, that's sort of the journey of trying to make sure that I understand that.
I like your answer, because I love that you're saying that it does, the space that you're in is what can dictate whether or not you should have separate brand images, where you have this identity here and this identity here, and that's okay. And now you're in a different space where you're trying to merge the two. So I quite like the fact that you, like with your journey and what you've explained now, is that it depends on where you are, which stage you are in your career, and also which spaces you exist in. Zesipho, what has your experience been?
Obviously, I get super energized and impassioned as the marketeer and brand manager in this space when we start dropping the word brand so early on in the morning. Bilo, I think for me, what I decided for myself when I decided that the way that I wanted to navigate my career was to be someone who was in themselves seen as a brand. And that applies to everyone. We are all walking, talking brands in every room we enter into, in every environment we enter into. And the most important decision that I made for myself when I wanted to start crafting what my brand was is, how did I want people to feel? Because that's what every single brand we choose every single day does for us. It leaves us with a feeling. And so the most important thing that we do at the inception of crafting our own brands is deciding, how do I want people to feel about me? How do I want people to feel when they're in my presence, when I'm in the space? Do I want them to feel energized, to feel inspired, to feel empowered, to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel like they matter? When you start defining for yourself what it is that you want people to feel when they are around you, when they leave a space in which you've been present, that's how you start crafting exactly what shape your brand takes, because it's the way you start to move, it's the way you start to speak, it's the way you start to engage and connect with people. And that's the start of authentic connections being built. And you see the real power of your brand taking shape, not when you're in the room, but when you've left the room. Because suddenly, when people start having conversations about when they need someone who has the ability to invoke a certain feeling in people, who has the ability to do a certain piece of work, who has the ability to transform a certain environment, your name is top of mind, because your brand has already etched itself in people's minds that way. And so I think that's the most important thing that any single person, and for myself, as I continue to craft my brand, that's what I hold true to myself, is what do I want to make people feel? And equally important to that is, I've started to embrace the idea of not making a personal brand a rigid thing. It can be so fluid, it can be completely transforming and transformative consistently and continuously, because that's what it means to have a human experience. So I don't allow my self-defined brand to constrict and to limit and to create boundaries for any kind of new frontier that I want to enter into. I mean, when I look at the fact that my personal brand for so long was that of being a marketing maven and a real expert in the beauty space and an expert in what it means to have a personal image and to help women to create these brands and products that help define their image. I felt it was so transformative for me to allow myself and give the permission to say, it's okay if you want to redefine that as your brand and if you want to enter into new realms of what your brand is. And so I think it's equally important when we craft our brands to also give ourselves the permission to redefine those for ourselves whenever we feel it necessary, and to not allow anyone's perception, anyone's definition of the brand that you created yesterday to restrict you from making your experience, your human experience, a transformative one where your personal brand can change continuously. Because then what it requires is you just need to wake up that morning and decide, what is the new thing that my personal brand does? And then I bring that to the room and I take everyone on that journey with me as I learn and I grow and I transform, and make sure everyone still continues to believe that my brand does that, because the foundation of what my brand does never shakes. The foundation is rooted on purpose. The foundation is rooted on faith, on spirituality, on trusting God. But the furniture on which I build everything else, and the furniture on which I put that foundation is what I continuously allow to change and to transform and grow.
Yes, I love what you're saying, because when you were saying this, I thought of this quote that says, people may not remember what you said or what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. Yes, and that's really what it's about with crafting a brand image. And I think when you move into corporate spaces or whichever industries we're in our career, we forget about the brand image. But it's important, because you want people to want to work with you. And you want people to think of you, like you said, you want to be top of mind. And how are you top of mind? You're top of mind based on how you made someone feel. Even in the workplace, it's still so important. We are having some technical issues with Luyanda, but she is working on it and trying to get back on the call. In the meantime, I'd like to move to Ayanda. You went from working in corporate to working in a startup. Can you please share your experience in terms of what are the main differences of working in either space? And also, what advice do you have for someone who potentially wants to either go from corporate to a startup or from a startup to a corporate?
Sure. I think my experience, obviously, the way it happened was opportunity and timing. So people always ask me, because I now get a lot of young professional looking for a career change, and they're like, can you help me with this? And I'm like, honestly, I can't even create the right template for you on how you can leave sort of your 9 to 5. And I mean, even a tech startup is a 9 to 5, but to join that kind of space and how you can sort of navigate around that. I mean, I recently had not even recently, I think it was last year. Someone was doing extremely well, working in London and, working for a law firm. And I'm just sitting there, I'm thinking, what do you want from me? Because I don't know. So I think it's just been an interesting one, because it's been what I'm trying to get to is that a lot of people are looking for that change, right? People are looking for something that's exciting. So when we get software engineers, for instance, when they join our company, a lot of them are moving from a space where they were probably working for a bank or working for a major institution, and they roll because there's so many of them. They were probably working on a button, and now they're coming to a space where they're working on building a platform with 2 other people. So now they get to be hands-on. And so I think the first thing honestly, that's been about my transition is that you're moving from a space where there's 20 people or 5 people, 10 people in your team, and who equally play a role in sort of helping you create the bigger outcome or the bigger case. Now you're moving to a space where there's you and another person, and that's it. You guys are the skeleton staff and the staff. And I think that in itself has just been such a great transition, because it allows you to not only see what the team looks like, but also allows you, how can you be innovative with what you have? How can you create with what you have? And how can you build with what you have? And I think more than anything, the difference in the two is that you have sort of that hands-on approach where you're more involved, right? So for instance, when I had 3 people check my work before it went out to clients. And that kind of process, you sort of sometimes can become complacent. You can sit there and say, there's this person and this person, and then there's a third person, then they sign it off, then it goes out to clients. And I'm in a space where I'm the checker and maybe I can get someone else. So when something goes out, I have to make sure that it's excellent, because generally there's not enough time for someone to also play that role, because everyone else is fulfilling another role, right? So that really pushes you to always equipping yourself. It pushes you to put yourself in a position where, you know, if you're not confident with this and you're not 100% confident, you have to arrive at that. And it means having to put in extra work to be like, I'm happy with this piece of work. I can stamp this. If anyone else comes back and says, who put this out? I need to say, I checked it 5 times. I'm the 5th person who checked it, you know? And so I think that sort of sense of having to have that understanding that because of the support, that the resources are very limited, in a sense that obviously with a lot of startups, you work with runways, you work with your burn, you don't work with like sales. That's sort of the life cycle of any startup. You know, the reason why Yoko raised 1.2 billion rand is to scale, so that they're not relying on how many machines people are buying, but they're able to take that sort of funding they've raised to pour it into the rest of their team and expand. And that's how you really operate. So you have a runway, you have a plan for the next 2 years until you reach a next fundraising. And you could say, can I have an extra person? I've been very blessed that I've actually brought in 2 more people onto my team. And that also has been really helpful, in a sense that
that's a very big deal.
So that's
that's a big deal.
So that has really allowed how I sort of build my team. So, but what I'm trying to get to is that the support is so different, that you have to be innovative. You have to think outside the box. And the thing is, you have to be self-driven. I always say that when you interview, there's that thing, there's that fire that someone has, because when it's tough, it's the only thing that gets you moving. When you don't know what your next step is, you're like, what can we do? And you have to problem solve, and bearing in mind that your team, probably you have maybe a few odd people that have more than 10 years experience. So it's a relative, most of the time it's a young team, and having to say, what can I do in that kind of space? And whereas serving corporate, you have that guidance. And I mean, not to say it's a bad thing, because sometimes I wish I sat there and said, shucks, if that partner was here to tell me that they worked on a case like this 20 years ago, that will like change how I actually have to go around all the corners and having to consult with another lawyer or something like that. But having to really think about that sort of that drive, that you have to be self-driven, in a sense that you are the answer to the outcome in most instances, and having to obviously rely on your team, on people who are, I'll have legal meetings. It's quite cute, in a sense that I'll have a product guy who probably doesn't know much about law, but wants to help in any way. Then I'll have someone who was part of procurement, and that's all they've done for like 20 years, also part of that meeting. And I have a science and a maths person there, but we're all evaluating a legal document, And it's just like sort of coming together and saying, okay, we all have different expertise and skills, so we can apply those in terms of trying to understand sort of the get down of this agreement, where we all don't agree with our partners who are proposing something. So I think that's another element, having to have that in that self-drive, taking that initiative. And I think, the last thing, I can always talk about this because it's been such a huge transition. I think the biggest also difference is around having to remember that you cannot, it's very hard to work in that space if you're not passionate. It's really, really hard to work in that kind of space, because you have to be there outside, like paycheck, outside, obviously you'll get the experience, but really waking up every morning saying, I'm believing this thing that we're building, this vision, what we have for Africa, and that's what I'm pouring into. Those small steps feed into something much bigger. Everything that, for instance, for me, I know per se, everything that I do is like, when we become the next, leading platform in agriculture, so I have to make sure that the foundation is good. The foundation is great because I'm pouring into that every single day. And even sometimes when your parents don't understand, you're like, why aren't you transitioning into maybe, like, for instance, I'm getting admitted soon. And they like, and I've pulled it off for a really long time because it was very hectic. They're like, okay, are we looking for new jobs? They're like, no, it's just something I'm doing for myself. And really having to be passionate, even when people don't see that. But it's so important, I think, with any career to be passionate. But I think so with this kind of space, because not everyone always understands your sort of your positioning. Not everyone always understands why you'll make that move, especially when you'll be fulfilling so many roles in one. You don't just go in there and fulfill the law role. You're gonna fulfill. I mean, at some point, I was doing HR, and I had labor law experience for 6 months. And I took that and I used it to apply. And luckily we have investors and I work with the HR department, but I'm just saying that having to also apply myself in that regard and to say, how can we make that work? So I think really that's just been something that's sort of the comparison and how it's been the journey. But I think ultimately, with anything you do, you need to find purpose and passion in that. If you don't find purpose in that, it really becomes hard to wake up every morning when there's obstacles. It becomes really hard when it's a very different space. You need to sort of have that sense of, this is where I'm meant to be. This is where God is calling me on that journey. And depending on your faith, but for me, really, it has been what God has said, that I'm part of something that's serving, and that's ultimately how I want to fulfill part of my mission and my purpose of being part of a space where I'm serving. And I think in closing, the skills you'll gain are, I want to say they're insane, but they really are, because now I've even done business courses in such a way that there's this thing about legal people and maths, now having to do something in BCom, and I'm like, that's crazy. But because I've had to learn that, I was tired of sitting in meetings and people are talking about financials that I don't understand. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I need to know these terms. Yeah. And having to do these courses to be like, so now I understand what people are referring to, so your skill set is so diverse and vast because of the fact that you have to play so many hats. You have to support the team in such ways that you might not be an expert in that. So you sort of have to put on another cap to say, what can I learn to better understand the kind of support they need from me? So those are some of the things, but I can really talk about this subject.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And thank you so much for being honest about it and the difficult parts of either space. Because I think often people talk about, move to a startup, you'll get more experience, but there are additional challenges that come with it. Yes, there's great benefits, but there are challenges as well. And I also love that you spoke about the benefits of being in corporate as well as some of the challenges that you may face there. I don't believe we should be demonizing or villainizing either space. It's just important to know the differences between the space and then know what you want out of it and go for it. Yes. So Luyanda, welcome back.
Thank you, Jesus.
You made it. Yes. So Luyanda, I want to go back to the initial question that I asked, because I find your branding very interesting, because you've managed to take your 9-to-5 brand, place it also on social media, and every other entrepreneurial venture that you go into, the brand is pretty much the same, consistent. So tell me how you have crafted your brand image and what importance, what lessons you've learned from this crafting of your brand image.
Ooh, I love that question. And I was praying that, let me not miss it. But thank you for going back. I think the first thing that was very, very important for me when I started understanding the whole concept of brand and what it means to be a brand was defining self. I had to really come into contact with who am I and what kind of brand or what kind of communication do I want to put out there about myself and what I do on social media. So I think at first it was just a matter of, utilizing the space to just put what I do and what I love sharing until, it came to a point where the whole branding thing became a thing about a year ago. So I had to kind of sit down to say, okay, who are you and what do you have to offer? So the first point of contact for me was defining who am I, right? And then after that, realizing that this is something that I always say, whether you craft it on social media or you craft your brand in the workplace, is that people matter, right? So make sure that you capitalize and you nurture those relationships. So this speaks to now your networking. This speaks to now using people and asking, not using them in a bad way, but using the resources that you have available, And a nice example would simply be, we recorded a podcast about a year ago, if not two.
Maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah. It could have been 2 years, but now I'm back on this platform as a friend of the brand because we've nurtured and we've kept that relationship going. So if you want to grow in whatever space that you're in, you need to understand that people matter, and you need to nurture and shape certain relationships, keep them alive, and that speaks to your networking. But then what I love that I caught on what Ayanda said was an unmatched work ethic. When she read, I was like, work.
The network, I don't know if it's just me on my side, but
Yeah, seems we've lost Luyanda.
Oh, Luyanda. Okay. I will just we'll just give her
disappear on my side.
Oh yes, we can hear you now, but we can't see you. I think you lost the network just as you were saying what you caught in what Ayanda said.
Yeah. So when Ayanda spoke, the one thing that resonates, for me with building a brand that I think she's doing amazingly is an unmatched work ethic. So having an unmatched work ethic is very, very important. Whether you're building on social media, where you're building a personal brand or a corporate brand, wherever you are, you need to have an unmatched work ethic. So that speaks to, putting yourself or allowing yourself to work so hard that other people get to see it as well, right? So whatever you do, whether it's be speaking, whether it's, doing makeup, whatever you do, have an unmatched ethic. Always be the person in mind. I always say that if you are going to do something, make sure you're the best at it. And I think that's been quite an incredible, lesson for me in building my brands, that if you are going to be an HR enthusiast, if you're going to develop talent, be the best person to do that. So that has really, really helped me. And I think also the one thing that I think we tend to underlook, especially if you're building a brand or crafting a brand in the workplace, is learning the company culture, right? Dressing for the occasion. For you to stand out and to be a part of, I know it sounds contradictory, but for you to stand out as whatever you do in your job, but also to be part of the organization by serving the greater objective, you need to dress for the occasion. So learn the company culture. And I think that's one thing that we tend to mistake. And I think also that's where the hostility will come in terms of the corporate world, is that we struggle a lot to learn the company culture. So once you align with that, it's easy to immerse yourself and grow in those spaces. So I've had to learn the company culture, whether it be the company culture of being a freelancer or the company culture of being in a 9-to-5. I've had to learn that. And also then see what part of the company culture do I align with, and how do I define myself in that space. And some of the lessons really, when it comes to deciding and defining, I had a huge defining who I was, not only, as a...
Luyanda, I think we may have lost you again. I think we have lost her again. But I just want to come, I absolutely love what she said, and I definitely agree that at the end of the day, nothing matches an amazing work ethic.
People. So how do I then begin to live that inside and outside, I got to master that, and I stayed true to what I was passionate about. Everything else made sense.
Luyanda, I don't know if you can hear us.
Yes, I can.
Okay, we did lose you for a second there. But I absolutely love the message that you've mentioned here. Understand which, like, the culture of what you're getting involved in, their mission, their goals. Find yourself within that, and then align those two. That'll definitely help you craft your brand image. So Z, I want to move on to you. You mentioned even in your intro that you've been pivoting. You went from luxury beauty brands to fast-moving consumer goods to now you're in the liquor space, that's very different, right? And
Yeah.
making these moves must have been very daunting. I want to know, do you have any tools that you use for like career mapping or just planning your next move?
Sure, it's such a loaded question. So I think first and foremost, my GPS, my internal GPS in every single decision that I make comes from a place of faith. I move with the knowledge that I am operating on God's plan. So I think first and foremost for every single person, it's about really understanding what is the thing that moves you and being finely attuned to that. And once I started to understand that for me, I am operating with the bias not for living out my own plan, but for living out God's plan for my life, the movements started to become so much clearer and so much easier to make when the decision to move or not to move posed itself. When people talk about these movers and shakers in the world of corporate or entrepreneurship, what everyone is always focused on is so much the movement itself, when that big jump happens, when they finally make the pivot, when they finally break through that glass ceiling, or when they finally navigate the boundary. What I value more than anything is not the move itself, but what happens in between the moves is where I place so much more of my focus. And what happens in between the moves for me is stillness. I am deeply rooted in the focus to be still and know that God is God. And I'm deeply rooted in the bias to be still and to know that when I am in that moment, in that space of stillness, that is where, for me, the insight, the wisdom to know when to move and when not to move comes from. I have also recently learned to understand in the making of moves and in this recent fundamental career shift that I've made is to not overweight the potential of what is happening in 10 years' time to restrict my movement now. And let me give you context of that. When you are in corporate, more often than not, when you find yourself in these big organizations that are very, very influential in the industries that you're part of, more often than not, the thing that people will tell you is, just stay still here, just stay here and do the work. You're safe here. This is such a brilliant organization. If you stay here long enough, eventually you'll grow into where you need to be. And a fundamental learning for me in my career right now has been to not overweight the potential of what is coming in that long-term horizon to what the present has to offer. So I really try to make decisions not based on overweighting the potential of the future, because if I live with a bias for what is the most important decision I can make right now in the present, what holds me in the best stead right now in the present, if I move by placing one foot in front of the other in that way, it really eliminates overweighting the potential of the future. And eliminates losing really great opportunities in the present because of the self-imposed or the other people imposed perception of what the potential of the future has by standing still. And often more often than not, people will say, just stand still. If you just stay still here and you keep working long enough here, then the future will have so many great rewards for you. And so what I often find is if I just stand still and listen to whether the potential to make a move is really more valuable than whatever it is that I don't have guarantee of in the long-term future, that's how I know that I'm making the right move. In as far as making moves in one's career, I think there are two types of people. There are people who love a safety net, who love the idea of moving towards a path of least resistance. And then there are people who run towards the fire. I think for myself in my career, I've always been the kind of person who loves to follow a path of least resistance, who loves to run towards the fire of challenge, of where they can be most uncomfortable, of where they have the most to learn, of where they can make the most impact. So I think what's really critical in as far as making moves is concerned is consistently asking yourself, where can I make the most impact? Where can I learn the most? Where can I be the most uncomfortable? Where can I be the most challenged? And more often than not, those areas are the ones that come with the perceived breaking boundaries or come with the perceived making monumental moves. And you'll see such a clear link and correlation between those decisions, because when you find yourself saying, yeah, I'm going to be really uncomfortable in this space, and I have so much to learn if I make this move, and I have so much to learn if I break this boundary towards something that is going to be uncomfortable, that's what you often find is the areas where you have the opportunity to really break boundaries, not just for yourself, but to start reconfiguring in other people's minds what boundaries really are. And that leads me on to another point is, I think it's really important to define for oneself what the boundaries are, because when you start moving based on what other people's self-defined boundaries are, you start to define your roadmap by other people's journeys and by other people's barriers and boundaries and not your own. And I'll give you an example is, for me, the idea of moving from a mega FMCG player in the beauty space to a huge opportunity in the liquor space felt like a boundary for some people. They thought, what are you doing? Who does that? Who makes a move like that? And for me, it didn't feel like a boundary. It didn't feel like I was making this move of breaking this perceived glass ceiling of what it looks like to move between completely different industries. For me, it felt like a natural progression. So in that, what it taught me and revealed to me was it is equally as important to not allow what people define as boundaries for themselves and barriers for themselves to inhibit your moves, because they become boundaries for you. And that was a really, really critical learning for me in this chapter is I've really got to start discerning, is this a boundary for myself? Or is it a societal boundary? Is it a boundary for the person on the other side of the table for me that they are now inflicting and imposing for me as a boundary?
So beautiful. This morning I was listening to a song when I was like getting hyped and ready for the session, and a song by Beyonce, and I actually forgot which song it was, but there was a line that said that when you start to tremble, when you're scared, that's where the magic is. And that's what I was thinking of as you were speaking about, how you like to run towards the fire. It's scary. It doesn't mean it won't be scary, but sometimes that's where the magic lies, and it's something that we need to remember. Yes. So okay, Ayanda, I'd like to come back to you now. Since you have mentioned how you've changed industries, you are a lawyer essentially, right? You are a lawyer, but you were in corporate, working in a law firm, and now you are working for a tech startup. Those are very different industries. And you're also a COO, which is very different, it's not traditional, let me put it that way. It's not traditional for someone in your career path to go for. What advice would you give for someone who is looking to change industries from what they studied, or what they qualified in?
Yeah, so I think I'm just going to be looking at my notes at the same time, but I am here. So ultimately, I think, you need to really go back to understanding why you want to change. Sometimes, wanting to change from one industry into another industry might not be about what you do on a day-to-day. It might actually be the company. You know, I often hear people saying, I want to change, I actually want to become this, I enjoy this. And it's more frustrations towards the company than actually the job, what you're doing. And you just need to change sort of the scenery and change into a different sort of position. So I think really understanding what's the desire behind you wanting to make that change, because that's very important, you know, and because you don't want to find yourself now changing everything to get there and say, oh my goodness, I absolutely don't like this. You know, I've wasted my time. And you know, the job market is quite tough. Once you leave another one and get into another one, now you've set in that it's hard to now, you know, in terms of jobs, what if you don't get a job? So it's really understanding what's the desire behind you wanting to make the change, and really to think about it more broadly, to say, is this a career thing? Is this an industry thing? Is this a specific company thing? Because it could also be an industry thing. You can take your skills and go work somewhere else. You could be in a traditional law firm, but you can take those skills and go work for Unilever or go work for a beauty brand that's more aligned with what you enjoy doing, which is still legal, but it's not sort of the same type of work you're doing. So really understanding where that stems from and be practical. You know, I think a lot of people are not in spaces where they can, because sometimes you might be laid off, so you don't have time to plan. If you get retrenched, obviously you can't plan so your next move, it just happens, so you start looking around. But if you do have sort of that luxury to be in a position where you can plan, so be practical and really start building towards exiting. So that means if you can get a skill, if you know you want to be in a different industry, you get that skill. You know, if you can upskill, do those short courses, speak to different people within that industry. So start being practical about how you can actually move towards that. And every single day is working towards the bigger goal, right? It doesn't have to be a haphazard, I'm out, peace, I'll see you. And, you know, some people do that, and that's fine, you know, and not to say and I think it's important, not everyone has the same journey, but if you can think about some of those things and, you know, really think about some of those things. And another thing is really finding someone you can speak to. You know, the word mentor is very different for everyone. Some people don't like to refer to someone as their mentor. But I think speaking to someone within that industry that has gone before you, to sit down and say, this is what I want to do. Because I actually sat down with someone who was in the legal industry. And when I looked at his career, I was like, one day, this is what when I look at my life, I want to say I was negotiating with Putin to stop the war, because of the type of work he was doing. So that's the kind of work he was doing. And I sat down with him and we had a long discussion about sort of where I see my journey. And even though he was not in the industry of where I was moving into, he was able to position himself through the other things he's done in the past to say, this move looks like this, because he's someone who really understood and has been in this space for a really long time. And to also remind me that I shouldn't be restricted. And I love what he said about restricting, because if you stay here, you'll become a partner one day, you'll become a director, and then you are fighting every single morning, because every day to go there, you absolutely don't want to be there. And I think just not restricting yourself to it. And it was really good to hear someone who spent their life in this profession to say that it's not one size fits all for everyone, and it's okay to transition out. So I think finding someone to speak to really helps in really grounding what your next move is. So again, it's very different for every person. It's very different for sort of that transition. So now you've sort of made this decision, you've gone through all that checklist, and it's also different for a lot of people by having to consider that. And then you step into this position. So for me, again, you're asking how my role of now moving into that kind of role. I mean, obviously, I had to really sit back and say, okay, now I'm here. What can I do? So I had to do my list in reverse. So I had to say, I need to acquire this skill. So let me work towards getting the skill. So I was doing, you know, WITS has really great short courses. I was doing WITS short courses, and luckily the company was paying for that. So I was able to position myself in such a way where I wanted to be the best equipped person, even though I was going to learn, but I wanted to play my part in saying, how can I take my legal skills and transfer them into what I'm doing, as well as what can I do in terms of how I can also best equip myself in that role, right? And I think also never see that your skills you've learned somewhere else are sort of gone to waste. You can take those skills and use them. You know, you can put on a legal hat when approaching something. It doesn't mean that you've sort of wasted that and now you've changed, you're like, what a waste of qualification. You can still use those skills in that. You can bring your value, not from a qualification perspective, but you can position yourself in such a way that what can I take from this and apply it there? And trust me, it will always bring something different. And people might not think about it from that sense. We'll be talking about financials and I'll bring a legal thing there. And it's like, oh, we never thought about that. Oh, we're talking about building a product. And I'm thinking now, from a legal perspective, what does it mean from building a product? I'm trying to insert all my legal things that I know. We need to get consent and stuff, even though the conversation is not around that, but it's about we're conceptualizing a product idea from inception. And as they're mapping out this product, I'm sitting and thinking, okay, legally, what are some of the things, even though it's not a legal session? So I'm able to also contribute from my legal perspective.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think also another thing, just building on that is like you need to build on what you already have done, and focusing on collaborations, focusing on teamwork. And those are some of the things that really help, and especially when you're on a new position that you don't understand, or you're still learning and you're still trying to find your feet. You need to also lean in and focus on how you can work as a team and collaborate with people around you. Because I think about how much collaboration I've sort of had to rely on from my team. And that in itself has been I feel like it was a skill in its own, because people show up, show up and they also assist, and people believe in this brand, people believe in the vision. So everyone wants to make this work. And that's why people are there to support you. So I think also relying on your team is so important in that. I think I'm going to stop there because I can't talk a lot.
Pilu, I want to add to that, because Ayanda has just inspired me to share a thought about a conversation that I had when I started my entrepreneurial venture and my business, Lamula. And that came from a personal existential crisis that I had, where I had a conversation with someone, a mentor at that, but I use the term very loosely, and I'm sure we'll get into later the concept of mentorship and all its different layers. But I remember saying to this person, I know I want something else. I want something different. I want something outside of corporate. I have no idea what that should be. I have no idea what I should be doing, but I know that I want to work on something that is outside of corporate, that I can build from the ground up, that I can bring my skill set to, that I can bring my experience to. And I remember this person saying to me, what is the point of inflection? So if you think of yourself almost and your journey almost as you're jumping between trampolines, So what is the point of inflection right now that you are jumping from? And if I started to analyze myself that way, there were two key pillars to me. The first was that I was an expert in the beauty industry and being able to really understand the business of beauty. And I was an expert in gap analysis and building brands that understood what gaps existed in markets and going after gaps in terms of market opportunities. And I think that's a wonderful way to really analyze the moves that we make. Is if I want a fundamental change in my life, what is the point of inflection that I'm moving from? What is the jumping or the springboard from which I am moving from? What is the thing that I know I have right now in my hands that enables me to then look at whatever else is out there and say, because I have this, it can make me a really good that, And so my entrepreneurial venture and my being an entrepreneur outside of being a brand manager came from a place of saying, my point of inflection is that I know I'm really good in understanding the beauty industry, and I know I'm really good in understanding what gaps exist in opportunities in the beauty industry. And so if we start to look at our moves that way, in that they don't need to be completely haphazard overnight decisions, if we start to analyze our lives in terms of what things we have at hand right now that can enable us to then go into new realms where we have really great expertise. And Ayanda has given so many wonderful examples of that, where in her current space, she is so able to apply herself as a brilliant legal mind. And that was her point of inflection. And that was the springboard from which she came from. And that's the thing that she now came in hand with. And it holds her in good stead in this current space. And I think if we start to look at our lives in that way, is everything is so connected. And if we apply that mindset of everything being interconnected, then you can start to really feel less lost when you're looking for new moves, by understanding that if everything is connected, then what is the thing from the current space that I'm in that I can use, that I can leverage to lead me into the new. And in as far as career decisions where one wants to continue to be employed, but move into a completely new industry, new sector, new business, equally so, that comes into play where, and I love the way Ayanda worded it, you've really got to understand, am I making a decision based on a job, or am I making a decision based on my ultimate career? And I really want to reiterate, in as far as making moves, that to stay in a place based on the love for the business, based on the love for a manager, and based on the love for the work is sometimes a risky decision, because those are variables that can all change, right? The culture of the business can change. Your manager can leave. The work that you do on day to day can be redefined, and your scope of work can be changed. So in as far as making moves is concerned, the moves have always got to be really rooted in being inspired, being motivated, and being instilled in your anchoring as an individual, your personal purpose, because those are the things that you have fundamental control over, and those are the variables that you can ensure do not change. And when they change based on your terms and not on anybody else's. So the moves come from a place of stillness. They come from a place of being anchored, because you have so much more control in the moves that you are making, rather than you making moves based on being responsive, because suddenly the corporate culture has changed and the rug has been pulled under your feet, or because your manager, who was the reason you were here, is leaving, and now it's a whole new different world and you don't want to be in this environment anymore. So I really would want to reiterate that when making moves, it's equally important to understand that the moves that you are making are based on a decision that has to do with your personal anchoring, rather than you making decisions because, oh, I hate this job now. Yes, you hate this job, but is the move you're making based on the fact that the next move leads into the fundamental ultimate career goals you have? And with that said, when you are making the decision to stay rather than to move, making sure that decision to stay is based on your personal anchoring, your personal purpose, your personal sense of self, and what your ambitions and objectives are, rather than variables that you don't have long-term fundamental control over.
Yes, absolutely. I can actually relate to so many examples that both you ladies just gave. And I have been in a position where I thought I outgrew what I do, but it turns out I'd actually outgrown the company, not the actual job. And I had a friend who told me that, and I'd never thought of things that way. And same, Z, with what you're saying. I love that you say, I have been in a position where I was loyal to a company and people too. And that exactly what you described happened to me too, where things changed and I was like, whoa, what do I do now? You know, so thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insights, ladies. Luyanda, you have had a very interesting experience in how you got into the job market. You shared that with me when we recorded our podcast. So I want to know from your perspective, as well as from your perspective, from your personal experience and your perspective as an HR enthusiast, what are alternative ways that people can enter job markets or transition between roles, get a new job that people don't necessarily always think of?
So I think from my side, instead of speaking about, and really is going to pour into what the two ladies have spoken about, that I also truly just resonate with, Apart from a specific platform that you can use to transition, the one thing that I believe that you need to understand and first figure out is your value add. This speaks to the gap analysis that Z mentioned as well. So value is very important, and I think more important now than ever because of the pandemic. Organizational structures have become very lean, right? And hence why you'll find that a lot of people are losing their jobs because they're becoming redundant, and also there are new jobs that are coming into play. So you always need to know what is your value add, because businesses are now paying for value, because we are at a point where as an individual and as a business, we are all looking for ways to save costs, but still get the same amount of value. So value is important. And I think when you begin to position yourself and brand yourself as either an entrepreneur, an employee, or whoever you show up as, you need to ask yourself, what value am I going to add, right? In any space. So before you even transition, so from point A to point B, you wanting to be at point B, ask yourself, what value am I going to add in that space, right? And another thing that I always speak to, I also conduct trainings, and I do a lot of induction training. So basically, you ladies would know that it's an introduction to the business, right? Where you get to know the organization, the processes, the systems. And the one thing that when we speak about the probation period, is that it's not only a space where the company gets to assess if you're the right fit, but also you can put the company on probation. So what I'm saying to you now is that have a probation period for where you want to go or where you are, to assess, is this the space that I want to be in? Just like how companies will assess, are you the right fit for the culture, for the business, and from a skills perspective. So always have that probation period for any space that you want to enter in. And it's okay to change, right? And I think now we are living in a very dynamic world, guys, where we are making careers off hobbies. We are making careers off things traditionally that you never thought in your wildest dream would be a paying career. So it's okay to change. It's okay to want more for yourself. It's okay to want something different, and don't feel bad about it. I think the one thing is that I know I'm a control freak, in the sense that I will write down what I want to see happen in my life, right? And I do that for my career as well. So I get so frustrated when things don't turn out the way that I, envision them to be. But also I then need to come back and say, relax, it's going to be okay, because so many things are changing, and your taste for your career, your taste for your passion points will also change, and that's okay. So I don't think that people should be feeling guilty for wanting more. Like, never be apologetic for wanting more and wanting better for yourself. And with that being said, I'm also going to reiterate the points as well of brand positioning. Speak to industry players. Follow them on social media. And that's the beauty now, is that you can know about an industry, about an organization, simply by following those people that are industry experts within that space. So follow those people, pop them a DM, send them an email, ask questions, learn as much as you can about a space before jumping in, right? Because that's when you're going to go back to say that, because I know about the space of human resources within South Africa, and I know what's happening, overseas, and I can see where we are moving and shifting to, this is how I'm going to add value. So you are not going to be able to answer that value add question if you don't understand what is happening in the space that you're going into. So use your if you are, it's a more professional space, use your LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is one of the best professional platforms that you can use to engage, And I always say that if you want to find out who's doing what in what space professionally, go on LinkedIn. The nice thing is that you can put keywords, brand manager for Tiger Brands. The person will pop up, mang, whoever you need. Everything is readily available for us. So it's how you use it, and if you use it as well. So take those calculated risks. I mean, what's this thing? Connect with people on LinkedIn, and you will find out everything that you need to know. But lastly, also get the basics right. And this is really speaking from an HR perspective, to say that, guys, how you introduce yourself and positions yourself, your CV, your skills, your experience, get it right. Always, be able to say that when I meet Zesipho or Ayanda in a conversation, I'm able to sell myself, and I have those things readily available. So have your digital CV, have your skills, your experience, your portfolios, your profile, or whatever it is that you do on you, whether it be on your mind, on your phone, as a link or whatever. Like, stay ready, basically, because
Stay
I
ready.
think now the window of opportunity is very, very small. You need to stay ready, because you never know when you're going to meet your next employer. You're never going to know when you're going to meet the person who's going to take you into the next step. So I think more than anything is that you stay ready, but also just do it. I think another thing is that we worry so much, and the wishful thinking. I want to be in that space. I want to leave the organization. I'm frustrated by A, B, and C. So taking everything that Ayanda and Zay has said and then actually executing it and making that move, leaving or having that conversation that is going to lead you in, the next space as well, is very, very important.
Yeah.
Mm,
I want to,
stay ready.
I want to add to that, and actually want to add to a piece of information that you asked earlier about the move from corporate to entrepreneurship. And I want to share a personal experience with that, because I have always been incredibly inspired by entrepreneurs. So I regard myself as an intrapreneur, and that's someone who operates as though they are an entrepreneur, who operates inside a business. So on every single brand I join, on every single brand I manage, I operate as though it really is my business. I treat it as though it is my entrepreneurial venture, and that's how I lead the teams that I operate with. We operate and move as if we were a lean startup. But when making the decision between moving from careers in organizations and corporate to entrepreneurship, it really is a difficult one, and it's not one that's made easily. For me personally, I wasn't at the place where I wanted to leave corporate. There are certain elements of corporate that still excited me. Intrapreneurship inside the corporate environment excited me. And so I think those are important conversations for people to have internally with themselves is, do you want to do both? Do you want to remain in corporate while having an entrepreneurial venture? Do you want to leave corporate completely and enter into entrepreneurship? Do you want to leave one corporate for another because perhaps it will allow you to become more creative where currently your corporate environment doesn't allow you to have that? And so I think it's important when making those kind of decisions about moving to understand that there are so many different avenues that one can go on. It's not necessarily just about making the move from one corporate to another, or moving from corporate to entrepreneurship, or doing both, which I undertook. And with undertaking that step of, I don't want to call it having one foot in both sides, but that's what kind of, I guess some people would perceive it as, where I am very much an intrapreneur who works within a very big corporate, but also an entrepreneur who works within a very lean and small startup where I am currently the only employee who runs the business. I think it's also very important to understand the parameters of your corporate obligations. And I'll give you a practical example is because my entrepreneurial venture was rooted in the beauty industry and providing a service within the beauty industry, scaling that and the amount of growth and the amount of things that I could do within my entrepreneurial venture was limited by my non-compete clause. So that's a real practicality that one needs to consider when making moves for themselves is understand the parameters of your corporate contract. Do they require that once you leave corporate, if you were to do it full time, and as far as being an entrepreneur, does it mean that you can't enter into that industry for 6 months? Because some contracts prescribe that. So when we talk about making career moves, we've also got to be really practical in understanding what are the parameters in which I can operate. On a personal note, I was restricted in terms of the breadth, the landscape in which I could enter into in the beauty industry in my entrepreneurial venture, because at my 9 to 5, I was within the beauty industry as well. And even after leaving the beauty industry, there is a certain time period that must lapse before I can fully scale my entrepreneurial venture to the full might with which I want to bring it to, because I'm restricted in as far as what I can do in the beauty industry for a certain period of months, because my contract comes with a non-compete. So when we are making these fundamental life decisions, it's important for us to understand that there are so many different ways to skin a cat and really explore the different opportunities and the different avenues that you can take to explore so many of your different passions and interests and intentions when you are trying to make moves. But even within those moves, understand whether there are conflicts between those moves, and understand what the parameters are that will allow you to be able to make those different moves coexist cohesively, and coexist in such a way that you are doing your due diligence in serving and being honest to whatever each of those separate avenues requires of you and calls of you to do legally and operationally.
Thank you so much for that. I want to move on to the audience Q&A. We have quite a number of questions here.
Ooh,
so
this is where it gets exciting.
This is absolutely. All right. So the first question that we have is how to find good job opportunities in South Africa and how to distinguish yourself among other candidates applying for the same position. Luyanda, I'm going to ask you to answer this one. Oh,
Hello, hi.
yes, we can hear you.
Yes, cool. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Can you please repeat the question for me?
Okay, it's how to find good job opportunities in South Africa and how to distinguish yourself among other candidates applying for the same position. I think you touched on it a bit, hence I just want you to just elaborate just a little bit further for this question.
Cool. So I think if I start with the second part where they're asking about how to make sure that you stand out, I think really the best question or the best answer to that stems from the value add part. So you've seen the job spec, you've seen what is required. So what is it about you that is going to solve the issues that that company will have? So you need to apply or portray yourself, in that email or in that CV document in a way that you are proposing yourself to be the solution to whatever, not really the problem, but the gap would be in that organization. So it's very, very important to be very direct. So this is the part where you make your skills known, you make your experiences known, that is obviously going to benefit and that is going to answer or fill that need in the gap. So if I may just make an example from the top of my head, if I can think of something to say that if we are looking for a qualified, qualified in the sense that you must have the credentials in terms of academics. So they want a brand manager at company XYZ, and we are looking for somebody that is going to grow probably a small brand or whatever the case may be. So somebody as a Luyanda, I know I'm not a brand manager, but this is just a hypothetical situation where I've worked and grown 2 small businesses. You will then obviously saw yourself using that experience as a case to say, I've worked with the likes of Drip, I've worked with the likes of Batu, this is what I have done, and this is how I plan on doing that for you guys. So guys, please start using, role playing as well as case studies when you apply for jobs in your CVs, because really, as people that are sitting on the other side looking for these candidates, we really just want the best person to get the job done. We are really looking at somebody that is suited in terms of, not only experience and skills, but also, are you going to be able to get the job done? And there's always a need in every job spec. So if people are looking for, a brand manager or an HR manager, whatever the case may be, there's always something, and you need to read the spec thoroughly so that you know exactly what it is that you're gunning for. So be very specific. Don't downplay your achievements. You'll find that some people you meet in an interview, and there are certain things that you completely adore and love about them, and you think they're absolutely amazing, but they hadn't mentioned them in their CVs. So always make sure that when you apply, tell all. It's make sure, think of it as the only opportunity you have to literally tell this person about the amazing things that you've done. So, and I think will obviously put you at top of the list. And also looking for those, those opportunities. You'll find that other opportunities, guys, don't get posted. And this is actually quite sad, is that many organizations are looking for people, but the whole process of recruitment is tedious and it's long. And people want to get, the positions and vacancies filled now. So word of mouth is great. So like I said, guys, network in that industry. People must know that if you are looking for an HR person, Luyanda is top of mind. Always be top of mind, because many now recruitments are in the form of word of mouth and who knows who. So your network is your net worth. So make sure that you nurture those those relationships, and you put yourself in those spaces, so that if ever people require somebody that has your skills, they know and they think about you.
Thank you so much, Luyanda. I definitely agree with that one. Next question I'd like to give to Ayanda. What advice do you have for overcoming shyness and stepping into a leadership role, especially for introverts?
Sure. It's an interesting one.
No pressure.
I'm thinking, because I'm an extrovert, and my husband is an introvert, so that's an interesting balance. I think ultimately, moving away from the introvert sort of personality, I think just maybe even stepping to a new position, a new role, now a new leadership role when you've never been in that role. I think it's just important to know that for me, again, going back to my faith, that understanding that I'm called to be in that position. And that's where I get my confidence, knowing that I'm meant to be there. And I think as Black professionals or Black women, we generally have a sense of like, do I belong here? Do I deserve to have a seat at the table? That whole imposter syndrome that really stops you from stepping into that position with full confidence, right? I always make this example that Black professionals versus white professionals, they walk into a space, white professionals, they could put their feet on the table because they're home. Till now we're sitting here with that, like, yes, we still feel like we're so grateful to be here. We're so thankful, like, because we reminded that there were 2,000 people who applied for this role, there were 5,000, and you were the lucky one. And I think these subtle things, they make you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful to be here. And it's important, I always think, and just going, sorry, I know I'm being around the bush, but I will bring everything together. When we interview, and it's so sad, when we interview white males, software engineers, my goodness, they think they're like the Zuckerberg of the century. They'll negotiate their rates, they'll negotiate their pricing, they'll negotiate share options. And you're sitting there, you're thinking, dude, you only have 3 years of experience. How they, but there's that sort of, like, no matter how mediocre someone is, there's sort of that sense of understanding that I'm meant to be here. And you guys are so lucky that I'm sitting this chin interviewing. And I sit there and I see Black females, and they're like, negotiate for more, we can legit stretch. And they're like, okay, I'm happy with that. And we need to sort of stop that. So I think really just understanding that you deserve to have a seat at that table. You are meant to be in that position, that you've been called to be in that position, that you're made for that. And this is your season. And that season means stepping in. And also, obviously, having the humility to be gracious when you don't understand. And because that doesn't mean you don't have confidence, right? It still means that you're owning the fact that you don't know everything. You're owning that I still have to learn, right? And I'm stepping to this position, even though I may not know this, but I'm confident that if I do learn, I will get better at that. So I would say, like, really understanding that, because that then goes back to sort of having to step into that when you are shy or you are an introvert, but really understanding and knowing that you just belong, you're meant to be in that position. Because I think the minute you understand and take ownership of that, it really changes your perspective of whether you need to tiptoe or whether you need to walk through that corridor, that also feeds into your confidence. And remember, people respond based on what you give out. So if you are still like, which is what I've been through, that journey of like, then you're going to be like this to everyone. But if you're walking in there and they understand, like, this person, I can't mess around with this person, or this person knows what she's doing, I think it's always that comparison. You look at a sort of and not to say, I'm not discriminating anything, but it's the fact, mediocre or not, but you're white, you think you're the best thing. And honestly, when you like saying, you listen, you're like, Tim, that's quite average, but you present me as if it's the most excellent thing. And so I think because they have sort of that sense, and obviously the systemic things, it's systemic built. It's been created like that, and we're stepping into a space that has systemically made things like that. But I think just owning your space and owning that, it really also goes a long way in terms of breaking that mold of feeling shy in that space, but really understanding from your purpose. And I think I love what the ladies have been saying today. Purpose is so important. Really understanding that that's where you're meant to be, and that also makes it so much easier.
Yes, definitely. So I hate to say this, but there's a few more questions that we need to get through. I love this conversation so much, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to ask if we can keep the answer a bit more succinct, a bit, I'm sorry to say that I want to chat with you ladies all day.
No.
But yes, thank you so much, Ayanda, for that answer. I think you're right. It's about knowing that you belong. The examples that you're giving are honestly valid, and I think thank you for sharing that, because it's just being honest about the situation and the comparison that you like, what as a Black woman you're walking into and what you are up against. Yes. Okay, so the next question says, what advice do you have for someone who might feel unfulfilled and challenged in their corporate role and is considering making a shift to a new company, or even to investing in their side hustle and making that their full-time gig? Z, I'm going to ask you to answer this one.
What advice do we have to give to someone who is unfulfilled in their new role?
In their current role.
In their current role. So the first thing you really need to understand is, what is the thing that is making you unfulfilled? Because if you are able to define those elements and those variables, it helps you understand and it sets you on the path for what it is that you're looking for. So if you treat it like building blocks, starting block one is, what is the thing I'm missing? Am I not creative enough? Is this not allowing me to have a certain skill? Am I missing a financial dexterity that comes with this role? Does it not have enough financial acumen? Does it not have enough responsibility? If you are able to define what it is you're missing, then it helps you to then build the next block onto that, because then it helps you to define, where is it that I can get the thing I'm missing? Is there another organization that I can research and find out whether they have roles that enable me to have the opportunity to be exposed to the thing I'm missing, the thing that I need, the thing that will energize me again? Or will I only find the thing by starting an entrepreneurial venture? If I do start an entrepreneurial venture, what sector and industry do I want to enter into? Again, going back to our point earlier, what is my point of inflection? What's my springboard? What's the value add, as Luyanda said, in as far as the industry that I can go into that will allow me to close those gaps and enable me to feel a sense of fulfillment, purpose, interest, excitement. I also want to add to that, one of the biggest pitfalls that we have as career-driven individuals and as success-driven individuals is we put so much pressure and focus on our careers being the 100% source of our fulfillment. So what I welcome is the challenge for ourselves to say, if there is a sense of fulfillment in my life that is missing, what can I do outside of my workspace that can re-energize me? Below, you are a wonderful example of that, where, and that's not to say there was something missing in your career, but where you brought about for yourself a whole new sense of fulfillment and a whole new sense of purpose outside of your life through this incredible platform. So those are wonderful things that we can start to really interrogate for ourselves, is how can I make sure that my career and my job are not my 100% sense of fulfillment, so that when that area is missing, there are other pillars of fulfillment, of purpose that I can lean on to give me a sense of daily meaning in my life.
Love that. Thank you so much. The next question that we have is, what are each of the ladies' favorite books that have shaped them into who they are today? So just a quick one. Z, your favorite book that has shaped you?
Oprah Winfrey, I know what I know for sure.
What I know for sure.
What I know for sure.
Yes, love it. Ayanda?
Purpose-Driven Life by Pastor Rick Warren. That's just changed my perspective on purpose.
Luyanda?
Guys, I've read so much and I love all of them.
There must be one that sticks out, like the first one that came to mind.
Oh my gosh, the first one that came to mind, emotional intelligence is not enough. It's my current read. I just forgot the author's name, but yeah, emotional intelligence is not enough. So basically, it's just about navigating your career.
Ah, perfect. Okay, the next question that we have says, hi, how do you start a business when it looks like everyone is doing it? It being the product that you want to provide, the conversation of seemingly oversaturated markets. I'd like to pass this one to, I'll give it to Luyanda, because I know you do have businesses on the side as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I honestly believe that there's always room for everyone. Like if it's really aligned to who you are and you've been called and it's your purpose to do just that, then do it. I think also that the whole system of the market is oversaturated is a myth. Like that is a concept that it's a thought that you have, and it's very limiting, because I don't believe that we can ever have enough speakers. We can never have enough actors and actresses. Like there can never be enough makeup artists. So there's always that one thing about you that is going to stand out, and make sure that when you master that, then everything else will fall into place. So yes, be a makeup artist, but what are you bringing that is different to what other makeup artists have? Yes, you want to be a speaker, but what do you want to speak about? What do you want to be known for? So when you just, polish that part, your value add, what makes you stand out, what makes you top of mind, then I believe that there's room for literally everyone. And another thing is that I always say that you'll never know if something will ever work out, or if you're the best at anything if you don't try. So try, make that mistake, and there's always a lesson with every mistakes. Every business that you start, it teaches you something and about yourself. So don't look at the end part where you see yourself to be successful, because then you'll be scared about not getting there, and fear will just overcome you. But just start and know that whatever it is that you're going to learn or is necessary for your purpose, you're going to learn in the duration of building or starting that business.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The last two questions that we have are actually for Luyanda, but anybody else can also chime in. Luyanda, please share thoughts on how one can go about choosing a recruitment agency.
Choosing a recruitment agency. So I think for me, I do a lot of recruitment as well, and the idea of recruitment agencies, it makes life easier. It's more efficient because basically you have somebody that basically sponsors you. So it's kind of like a sponsor, basically. So when they know of any job openings, they will be the people first to put you above the line. But I do know that not all organizations will use recruitment agency, and they shy away from that because, one, from a cost perspective as well, right? So I hate, or I don't want people to focus on getting the right recruitment agency and only depending on that particular agency to be your sponsor, or to set you up for success, because not every organization will use recruitment agencies. So you miss out on tons more opportunities because you're only relying on that one source. Yes, have that organization that will vouch for you, but also you need to do the work for yourself and put yourself out there. And like I said, there's easier ways of marketing yourself and your skills and what you do now, apart from sitting in your CV. You could be profiling yourself right on Twitter, on Instagram, and all these things, and engaging with the organizations on social media, engaging with the people that are working in there as well. So don't just don't be closed-minded about it. Be very open-minded and literally explore all avenues.
And what advice do you have for a newly graduated person to stand out especially when the academic record isn't so cute, or it took them a bit longer to attain their degree?
Girl, and I'm assuming it's a girl. Like, don't worry about those marks. Those marks don't even matter once you're already inside. But I think the first point of contact, it would be for you to forgive yourself. You're not going to be able to put yourself out there or be confident in selling yourself if you don't believe it. So yes, your degree was delayed, or your qualification was delayed. Yes, those marks are not cute, but the focus should be on how do we then now move forward. So forgive yourself, it happens, and know that there's still room for you to succeed even with those uncute marks. I always say that delayed is not denial. Just because your qualification took longer than everyone else, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get the job and you're not going to get a seat at the table. And I always say that when it comes to academics and your marks, there are certain careers that are very strict with that, granted. So if you are in a space where those marks do matter, I know fields such as engineering or things that have to do with math, I believe there are spaces like that. So go rewrite or find a way in which you may improve those marks, but really don't hold yourself to the past or what you couldn't do better at that moment, but know that in the future you still can succeed with that. So or put yourself out there, apply with your marks, because I honestly don't believe that you are your marks, and some people may be challenged academically, but when it comes to getting the job done, then they do it. But I also say, guys, please be active in your time in varsity, be active, volunteer, do your informal internships, shadow people, because that experience is really, really necessary. You don't want to start from scratch once you've gotten that qualification. So in your first year, second year of work, volunteer in the department in which you're studying in, volunteer in an organization, speak to your lecturers. They know where you guys can start placing yourself while you're still studying, to make sure that by the time you finish your degree, you already have, an idea of the kind of company that you want to be in. So don't rest and think, I'm only going to start working when I finish my degree, but do things that are in line, that are going to look good on your CV whilst you're studying.
So this has been amazing. First of all, oh my gosh. Before we end off, I just want to run through the room for any parting words. It's Women's Day. For any woman that's out there watching today, listening in, and what parting words do you have for someone that is about to make a move, wants to make a move? Ayanda, I'll start with you.
I'm trying to I've been getting all the questions for a long time.
I saw you look up and unfortunately.
I was just like, I'm really trying to think. I'm like, it has to be powerful, hey? I'm like,
okay. Do you want to think about it a bit? We can move on to someone else.
Yes, let me think.
Z. Parting words.
To anyone who is needing to make a move, considering making a move, wondering whether the move that they potentially need to make is the right one, I would say make sure the move is rooted in purpose, but also don't allow purpose to be a barrier. Allow purpose to be fluid. Allow purpose to be something that you continuously define for yourself and redefine for yourself as many times as you want. And my parting shot is that a ship is safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are meant for. So when you need to leave the harbor and go out to sea, welcome the opportunity to do that. And eternally remember that you, and I'm going to quote Maya Angelou here, I am the person I am, not the work I do. You are not the job. So allow yourself to understand that you are the most important thing in every single job that you do, and allow that to govern and to guide every single move and decision that you make, that you and not the job or the company are the most important thing.
Yes. Luyanda, over to you.
I see why Ayanda was nervous, guys. That's so amazing. Thank you so much for that. Even I took that as well. But I think really, just to add on what she had spoken about, our careers are part of our lives. They are not our life, the only life that we have. It's just, it plays a very huge part in how you show up, yes, but don't make it just about your career. There's so many other things that kind of affect how you show up in your career. So nurture those things as well. And I love the fact that as the world of work is changing, self-care and wellness is becoming something that we're bringing into the organization. So I'm here to say that, take care of self, because really how you show up is really in your career is determined on how you feel about who you are. So go back to the drawing board and define who you are. Who am I? What do I want? And how do you then begin to take care of that, because you want to show up as your highest self? And lastly, just start. However you want to break into, these new industries or pivot your career, just do it. So less talking about it. Be very strategic, but make those moves. And I think this conversation really was a testament of all the kind of, ticks that you need to make on your to-do list before you transition, before you pivot, or before you leave.
Yes, thank you so much. Ayanda, you're going to close us off for the day.
I think everything that Z and Lou said is really awesome. Really echoing their sentiment. I think ultimately, if you want to make that transition, if you want to make that move, you need to always go back to purpose. I think that's something that even Z touched on, that it's really hard to sort of transition out without really understanding if that's rooted in purpose, because ultimately, whether you are doing this today and you're doing something different, at the end of the day, it's feeling the bigger picture of what your purpose is, right? So it's very important to really sit back and really understand what that looks like. And also remember that I think this is so important, especially people in corporate, and there's nothing wrong. And I think we all call to be in different spaces. And I always believe that calling is based on vocation, right? And then purpose is much bigger than sort of your vocation. So anyway, just to say then, people in corporate, that it's not one size fits all, your career journey. It's so important that you don't wake up there thinking that I have to be this because this is what I studied. Therefore, I have to be a partner. Therefore, I have to be the director of the auditing firm, whatever it is. You have to just remember that your journey is your own journey. You need to own that journey. You need to redefine what that looks like for you if it's still aligned with the purpose. So it's very important to make sure that those things, you're always checking, am I here because I'm meant to be here, or am I here because I'm meant to be here? So really go back to that, because, and I think also going into that, we don't find identity in our roles. Our identities in something much bigger. And again, I'm Christian, so my identity is with God. And it's also hard to get lost in having to find identity in your career and stuff. So remember that it's not in there. Even if you're doing something that you're not finding fulfillment in that season, doesn't define your identity. It's very important to do that, because sometimes you can get lost in that. So those are my 3 things. And I think those 3 things will also form part of my parting shot.
Yes, thank you so much, ladies, for taking time on a public holiday, a day that's supposed to be our break. But thank you so much time. Thank you so much for your time, for your stories, for you sharing your personal experiences as well, and of course for sharing the wonderful advice. I personally also learned a lot that I'm going to apply tomorrow. So please enjoy the rest of your day. And once again, thank you for everyone that tuned in. We had quite a big turnout today. Thank you so much, everyone that tuned in. And I hope that you got a lot of takeaways from this conversation.
I definitely did.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. And happy Women's Day. Happy Women's Day.
Thank you.